All's my life I has to fight, nigga. All's my life hard times like yeah, bad trips like yeah. Nazareth, I'm fucked up, homie, you fucked up. But if God got us, then we gon' be alright.
Nigga, we gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. We gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Huh? We gon' be alright. Nigga, we gon' be alright. Do you hear me? Do you feel me? We gon' be alright.
Short-term memory is limited. Psychologists argue it holds only about 7 bits of information at once, and only for a few seconds. This is why most ads fail. They enter short-term memory, but nothing pushes them deeper. Now, to reach long-term memory, information must receive elaborative rehearsal, meaning it must become something meaningful, emotional, symbolic, or relevant. Graffiti naturally invites elaboration because it carries social context, storytelling, and identity cues, but there are even more psychological mechanisms at play. To understand why graffiti advertising stays in our minds longer than most traditional ads, we need to look closely at 2 powerful systems in long-term memory: semantic memory and episodic memory. These 2 systems shape how we interpret the world, how we make decisions, and ultimately, how we remember a brand. Semantic memory is our storehouse of meanings, the mental dictionary we've built throughout our lives. It holds facts, concepts, and associations, colors and what they symbolize, shapes and what they remind us of, brand logos and the feelings they carry. When graffiti uses strong, clear imagery or recognizable symbolism, a raised fist, angel wings, a fox running, a pair of bold eyes, your brain doesn't just see the image, it matches it with previous knowledge. This matching process strengthens the connection, making the ad easier to retrieve later on. Semantic memory is what helps you recognize the Nike swoosh without even the word Nike. It's what makes red feel energetic and blue feel trustworthy. And on the street, graffiti artists use semantic memory intentionally, or sometimes accidentally, through color, psychology, symbolism, and cultural references. On the other hand, episodic memory is completely personal. It's the memory of moments, what psychologists call autobiographical experiences, where you were, what you heard, what you smelled, who you were with. Episodic memory attaches emotion to information, which makes the information harder to forget. If someone sees a graffiti ad while walking to school, hanging out with friends, or going through a stressful day, the emotional tone of that moment becomes tied to the image. The mural becomes a mental bookmark for that episode in their life. Even years later, revisiting that same wall can bring everything back. The mood, the soundtrack of the city, the weather, the feelings. Advertisers rarely get access to this depth of memory, but graffiti does. As I've been putting this film together, one thing has become very clear. Graffiti doesn't just work as an artwork, it lives in an environment. And that environment where people are coming in day and day out, walking, driving to businesses, to work, make them a part of the experience. And when you live in that experience, it plays a very important role in how we memorize things. And our retention when it comes to any advertisement and any piece of work that stands out in its vibrant nature. It's not as abrupt and in your face as a social media ad, but it works in a way where it's still saying, I'm here, I'm showing up, and you're gonna remember me.
I'm done with tricks, don't need no money to blow. Deadly aim, self-contained, superstar, the Yoda name. Blood diamonds, finna go to hell for my chain. The piece fitted on my head, though. I'm too, you can't reach me with the cell phone. No goodbyes, no hellos. You don't want this fight.
That's why I wanted to come out here and record in a real space rather than just talk over slides. When you're physically surrounded by graffiti, you begin to understand how it functions as a psychological tool. The colors, the textures, the scale, the placement, all of these elements become sensory anchors that help encode a message more deeply into long-term memory. One of the strongest forms of memory is context-dependent learning. People remember information better when they return to the physical space where they first encountered. Every time someone walks past the same mural, the message, and the brand, it reactivates in long-term memory. This is free, repeated exposure without the fatigue of digital ads. And because of this, it becomes a very powerful form of retrieval cue for consumers. And this is where elaborative rehearsal comes into play. Graffiti encourages us to think, to interpret, and to pause, even for half a second. That tiny moment of mental engagement is enough to push the message deeper into our long-term memory. This wall behind me is a perfect example. The artwork might not be an official advertisement, but the visual style, the symbols, and the emotional tone still function like one. It activates effective priming, meaning the emotional style of the art influences how you interpret the message. Bright colors evoke excitement and energy, muted tones create calmness or nostalgia, sharp edges feel aggressive, rounded lines feel friendly. Brands pay attention to this, and graffiti artists naturally embody it. Standing out here, surrounded by these walls, you start to understand why graffiti can be so effective at reinforcing long-term memory. It's immersive, it's emotional, it's grounded in real environments and real experiences. Because of that, it taps into the deepest layers of how we remember. Not just what we saw, but the entire moment we lived while seeing it. Now, let's zoom in on a powerful example of a brand using graffiti not just for art, but as a retail agency. In 2019, Nike partnered with Sao Paulo-based street artists and the Brazilian creative agency AKQA to launch their Air Max Graffiti Stores campaign. Rather than just relying on traditional stores or digital platforms, Nike turned the city's graffiti walls into immersive sales points. Graffiti characters, iconic figures already part of Sao Paulo's urban art, were painted wearing Air Max shoes, literally giving the walls feet. What made the campaign even more innovative was the use of geolocation. Only people physically near these murals could unlock the limited pre-sale of the shoes via Nike.com. The results were huge. The campaign drove a 22% increase in visits to Nike's website and translated into significant sales. It also won the Media Grand Prix at Cannes Lions, a testament to how blending street culture, technology, and marketing can create unforgettable brand experiences. This case perfectly illustrates how graffiti, when done authentically, does more than decorate walls. It becomes part of the consumer's journey, embedding brand imagery in real environments and real lives. As I spent time recording these walls, digging into research, and putting this film together, one thing became really clear to me. Graffiti changes the way we experience advertising, not because it tries harder, but because it actually feels real. It lives in the same places we walk through every day. It blends into our routines, our neighborhoods, and even our moods. Working on this project helped me realize that the most memorable messages aren't always the ones backed by big budgets or flashy production. Sometimes they're the ones painted quietly on a wall, waiting for someone to slow down long enough to notice. If anything, I hope this film shows how creativity, culture, and psychology overlap in ways we don't always think about. And maybe it reminds us that the things we remember most are often the ones we stumble upon, unexpected, unpolished, and totally unforgettable. Thank you.
So nasty that it's probably somewhat of a travesty having me. Then he told the people, you could call me your majesty.